Imagine stepping into a sparkling city built entirely for joy and progress. That was the 1901 Pan-American Exposition in Buffalo, New York. It was a celebration of North and South American unity, dazzling display of the future powered by Niagara Falls electricity. But hidden beneath the spectacle was political assassination, financial disaster, and surprising cultural controversy. Today, we are diving into the full, untold story of the fair that shocked America, including some shocking, sad stories about Annie Oakley, Calamity Jane, performers, and of course, the assassination of a president. The Pan-American Exposition ran from May 1st to November 2nd of 1901. It was located on 350 acres of parkland and farmland just north of downtown Buffalo. The city was chosen because of its thriving transportation hub and, most importantly, its access to cheap, abundant power from nearby Niagara Falls. The goal of the fair was ambitious: to promote commercial harmony and cultural unity between North and South America. They wanted to show the world the future of technology and cooperation. The sheer scale was breathtaking. It cost an initial $10 million to build, which is about $370 million in today's money. A massive undertaking. Hidden fact: the fair was built at a phenomenal speed. Construction began in 1899, and architects and builders worked often 7 days a week to meet the deadline. It truly was an instant city. The most famous feature of the expo was the lights. Electricity was the star. The main structures were bathed in light, earning the nickname the Rainbow City because the buildings were painted in bright, vibrant colors: yellow, blue, and green. Not the classic white of previous World's Fairs. At the center stood the magnificent electric tower, a 389-foot tall structure that was wired with over 43,000 light bulbs. The entire fair came alive at night thanks to the power generated at Niagara Falls, largely due to the efforts of people like Nikola Tesla and his alternating current system. This was the first major public demonstration of electricity on such a grand scale. Being able to walk through the glowing metropolis was a huge draw, convincing millions of Americans that electricity was the future. By the way, the amazing silent film clips you are seeing today were mostly captured by Edison Manufacturing Company. Thomas Edison and his company saw these world fairs as the perfect opportunity to showcase the magic of cinema. They would film the parades, the crowds, and the massive buildings, then show the footage back home. In a way, these films were the first travel vlogs. Their creation gave us a precious, moving glimpse into a world otherwise lost to time. The fair drew incredible star power. The Indian Congress was the name given to the exhibit of Native American tribes where the captured Apache leader Geronimo was displayed as an attraction. The living exhibit of individuals from various tribes included the Lakota and Apache. It was created by showman Frederick Cummings. Geronimo, who had been a prisoner of war since 1886, was one of its prominent attractions. He was guarded by the U.S. Army and drew large crowds. He sold signed postcards and other merchandise to capitalize on his fame. While the exhibit was a popular attraction, it reflected the exploitation and overflow of Native Americans by displaying them as a spectacle for non-Native audiences. No fair was complete without Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. The show itself did not perform on the main grounds. They set up their spectacular show right outside the fair gates, capitalizing on the massive crowds. Famed sharpshooter Annie Oakley performed at the Buffalo Bills show, where people loved her incredible shooting skills. After the Wild West show left the expo, they headed south. On October 29, 1901, the Wild West show's train wrecked while traveling from Charlotte, North Carolina to Danville, Virginia. The locomotive crashed into another engine, and the impact pushed the baggage cars and several passenger cars off the tracks. No people were killed, but the crash killed many famous show animals, domestic and exotic, including 101 horses that belonged to the Wild West show. Annie Oakley was severely hurt in this crash, suffering a spinal injury that temporarily paralyzed her and required 5 operations to correct. The severity of the accident and the extensive recovery process forced Oakley and her husband, Frank Butler, to permanently leave Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. After recovering, Oakley transitioned to acting, starring in a less physical demanding stage play called The Western Girl. She later joined another Wild West production, The Young Buffalo Show, in 1911, and continued to perform shooting expeditions and teaching marksmanship until her death in 1926. Here's a fun fact. Annie Oakley promoted the service of women in combat operation for the United States Armed Forces. She wrote a letter to President William McKinley on April 5, 1898, offering the government the services of a company of 50 lady sharpshooters who would provide their own arms and ammunition should the U.S. go to war with Spain. The Spanish-American War did occur, but Oakley's offer was not accepted. How cool is this archival find? The actual letter she wrote to President McKinley. This is a sad story. Calamity Jane was also at the expo. At the time, she was homeless and an alcoholic. She worked at the expo selling her self-published autobiography. But sales were poor and her efforts not profitable. She then joined the Indian Congress exhibit. but her alcoholic ways caught up with her. On one occasion, she was arrested for public intoxication and spent the night in jail. She was fired due to her heavy drinking and disruptive behavior. Before her time at the Expo, she had also performed as a storyteller in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, which toured across different cities. By the time Buffalo Bill's Wild West show arrived for an appearance at the fair, Jane was in a desperate state. She begged Buffalo Bill Cody to help her return to the West. Buffalo Bill paid for Jane's railroad ticket and gave her money for meals on the way, essentially funding her escape from Buffalo. He noted, "Her sorrows seemed to need a good deal of drowning." Jane returned to the Black Hills region and died in Terry, South Dakota, 2 years later in 1903, in poor health and still struggling with alcoholism. She is now buried next to Wild Bill Hickok in Deadwood, South Dakota. Another interesting character at the Expo was Princess Wyona of the Indian Congress. She was a faux Sioux sharpshooter that became Annie Oakley's rival at the Expo by reinventing herself as a Native American. In actuality, she was the Caucasian woman Lillian Smith, and she was a Wild West sensation. At the Expo, she was billed as the champion rifle shot of the world, but also the daughter of the chief Crazy Horse and a white woman born in a teepee on the south banks of the Big Cheyenne near Fort Bennett, Dakota. The promoter, Cummings, offered a $1,000 reward to anyone who could beat Wyona with a rifle at the exhibit. Her extraordinary shooting skills were said to have been boasted upon her by supernatural spirits of the Indian world. In fact, she was 29-year-old Lillian Frances Smith, the daughter of a white Quaker couple from New England. She was a former performer in Buffalo Bill Cody's Wild West show, but was cast aside for the legendary Annie Oakley. Her life turned out to be a story of heartbreak and a father who controlled her and profited from his child's performing skills. She died in 1930 at the age of 56 and is now buried in Oklahoma. I am curious if anyone had heard of her before. Let me know in the comments. The most famous and tragic event of the fair happened on September 6, 1901. President William McKinley traveled to the Expo as the guest of honor. He was there to give a major speech the day before, celebrating Americans' prosperity. On September 6, he attended a public reception inside the Temple of Music, one of the fair's most beautiful buildings. We've actually shown it several times throughout this video. As he stood greeting the public, an anarchist approached him with a concealed handgun wrapped in a handkerchief and shot the president twice. McKinley was rushed for medical help, but His injuries and that medical help sadly would prove fatal 8 days later, leading to the presidency of Theodore Roosevelt. Looking at the footage of the crowd watching his speech the day before, I have always wondered if his assassin was in the crowd. I actually have been looking at close-up versions of the footage, but didn't see anyone who looked like him or was suspicious. The hats get in the way of seeing anyone's face. Let me know in the comments if you see something curious. On this channel's video listing and playlist, you can find many videos on the very sad and in-depth stories of President McKinley's assassination, death, and funeral. All the videos contain amazing footage and pictures of these events. I will also put linked panels at the end of this video to those videos. I did find what I think is a good match for his assassin in another clip, marked August 14th, but that date might not be the exact day the clip was taken. Sources say he arrived in Buffalo on August 31st, about a week before the shooting. He claimed he followed McKinley around the expo before shooting him. The assassination was on September 6th. I took screenshots of this person who is curiously looking at the camera as he walks by. Comparing the nose and chin area, I find them to be very similar. Tell me in the comments what you think about the comparison. I am presently working with the archives to verify if there is any possibility this might be Leon walking by. One of the most famous and popular exhibits at the expo was the Johnstown Flood exhibit. The concession featured a graphic illustration of the 1889 disaster in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, which was caused by a dam breaking and resulting in the loss of 2,200 lives. The sizable building gave the appearance of being constructed of brown sandstone. Tickets were 25 cents for adults, 15 cents for children. It was one of the most successful on the Midway, with a reported $60,000 in profit for the creators, which was a lot of money in 1901. It included a massive diorama that used water, lighting, and sound effects to simulate the devastating 1889 flood, proving to be a huge, although morbid, crowd pleaser. I have not been able to find pictures of the diorama itself. The expo featured a range of living cultural exhibits designed to showcase the peoples of the Americas. The most famous was the Streets of Mexico, a large-scale, intricate recreation of a Mexican marketplace, complete with homes, shops, and food. People loved walking through it, feeling transported to another country. However, many of these exhibits were highly controversial. The Darkest Africa exhibit, for example, was particularly offensive. It displayed groups of people from various African tribes living in recreated villages, essentially treating human beings as part of an anthropology zoo. This was a common but deeply disrespectful practice at World's Fairs of the era, catering to popular but prejudiced views of exotic cultures rather than promoting true unity. According to local lore, a scandal did follow the Darkest Africa exhibit when several of the performers, including members of the Pygmy tribe, tried to leave the grounds, feeling they were being exploited and underpaid. The assassination sealed the fair's financial fate. and its physical fate. The entire event lost money, about $3.5 million, which translates to over $130 million in today's money. After the tragedy, officials decided not to preserve the Temple of Music, the building where McKinley was shot, choosing instead to tear it down. They feared it would become an unwanted, macabre shrine. Today, very little remains of this magnificent rainbow city. Most of the plaster structures, built quickly, were torn down by 1902. However, the New York State Building is the only major structure still standing. It was built of stone and brick, designed to last, and today it serves as the Buffalo History Museum. A portion of the original Grand Canal ran through the site, also still exists in the local park system. Let's see what the landscape looks like today. On my left is the map of the Pan-American Expo. On my right is today's map. As you can see, there is a lake here called North Bay, and then there's a thing just called Lake. Over here, North Bay is still there, and there's still like a road or a path around it, just like there is here. I don't see the electric fountain that's in North Bay anymore. And then the lake now is called Hoyt Lake. And as you can see, some of the paths are still there. They're a little bit different. And over in this corner here is actually what is today is a cemetery where President Millard Fillmore is buried. So he was buried there during this event. And it's right on the edge of the lake. So here's the edge of the lake, here's the edge of the lake. One of the buildings that still exist is the Buffalo History Museum. And as you can see, it's still there. On this map, as we go in, we see that it is the New York State Building. So it still sits right here on this lake, right here. A remnant that isn't often talked about is the power plant that supplied the power for all those lights. Niagara Falls Hydraulic Power and Manufacturing Company was a key player in harnessing Niagara's hydroelectric power for the fair. Operating at its large power plant in the gorge, it supplied power to local industries, though it was not the only entity developing power from the falls. The company was founded in 1882 and was the first to generate hydroelectric power on a commercial scale from Niagara Falls, using a canal and tunnel system to deliver water to turbines in the plant. In June of 1956, Station Number 3 sustained severe damage. Water seeped behind the power plant and the wall of Niagara Gorge, causing 2 of the 3 stations to collapse into the gorge. This caused loss of 450,000 kilowatts of power to the New York State power grid. It also led to the government takeover of the power stations and the end of private ownership. Today, they are developing the site by reinstalling the elevator to the bottom and opening the site to tourists. The wall behind one power plant is still intact, and debris from the other 2 is still seen at the bottom of the gorge. The lasting legacy of the exposition is a mix of sadness and progress. It showed the power of electricity, but it also exposed the deep cultural prejudice of the time. If you want to see some artifacts, The Buffalo History Museum is located in that one remaining building. It holds a major collection of items from the 1901 fair, including official documents and souvenirs. In addition, there is a fascinating and dark history concerning the doctors who treated McKinley. To learn the shocking details about the medical errors and questionable choices made by the doctors, which some historians believe sealed his fate, check out our video on McKinley's death and funeral and how the doctor's plunders might have been the real killers. In 1901, the Pan-American Expo was a pivotal moment. It ushered in the age of electricity while closing the door on the Victorian era with a single, tragic gunshot. It truly was the fair that changed America. What amazed you the most about the Pan-American Expo of 1901? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for joining us today. We invite you to watch all our videos from famous funerals to diving into the archives to find generations of history.